Welcome back to the show, my friends. I am your host, Eric Szilagyi. If you've had an uncomfortable experience and you'd like to have it shared here on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. The world wants to hear your cryptid and UFO experiences, so reach out to me and let's get yours on the next episode of Uncomfortable. If you haven't yet, make sure to like us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65. Once you get a chance to listen to an episode or two, please make an effort. Leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you can. That alone is the most important thing that you can do to help get this show out in front of others. And with more people listening, that means more great stories coming your way. If video is more your thing, then make sure to subscribe to Uncomfortable Podcast on YouTube, where you can get the video version of most shows. If that is where you choose to listen to us, please make sure to click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you are notified of each and every new release. Take a minute and check out the Uncomfortable link tree. It's the single best place that you can find anything and everything uncomfortable in one spot. The link for that will be in the show notes below. Tonight's guest is a longtime Ohio researcher from the area of Newcomerstown. You got into the subject back in 1984 after reading John Green. Claims a 1985 daylight sighting south of Newcomerstown, kind of in the Guernsey-Coshocton area. He's the founder of the Eastern Ohio Investigation Center, EOBIC, and publisher of a monthly Bigfoot report since the early 1990s. He's both organizer and host of Ohio's long-running Bigfoot Conference scene, widely credited with launching what later became the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. He's appeared on History Channel's Monster Quest, the episode of the Ohio Grassman. He ran the Sasquatch Triangle internet radio show, and has produced several Ohio-focused documentaries, including Sasquatch at Salt Fork. If you are ready, let's get into it. So if you will, please give a warm, uncomfortable welcome to Mr. Don Keating. Don, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, Eric, and that was the most uncomfortable introduction.
I appreciate that, sir.
Just a couple of real quick things, not to correct you, but I just wanted to clarify one or two things there.
Please.
The encounter that I had in September of 1985 was actually a nighttime encounter, and it took place at 10:04 p.m., in property or on a property where no one was living at the time.
Okay.
And that I just want to make sure that was clarified, because big difference between if I had seen it at day as compared to what would have happened when I seen it at night.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that in itself is proof that the internet lies.
No way.
Because
I just read on there that climate change was over. Are you kidding? It's got to be true.
Yeah, I literally pulled that out of an article that was written about you. So
I'm not surprised. I'm not, nothing surprises me anymore.
Well, please feel free to correct me on anything else if I have gotten it wrong, because we have not had a chance to talk prior to recording this episode.
Okay, I'll be happy to.
So, Don, let's put the cart before the horse, as it were. The whole reason that I got in touch with you was, this is not to throw shade at anything or any organization or any person, but having done a lot of Bigfoot conferences, including 2 of my own, you see the same speakers year in and year out, and it wears on you. I mean, they're great people, but how many times can you see the same speaker? Nothing changes. Nothing dramatic has happened in the world of Bigfootdom that has garnered any kind of different conversation. It's all kind of a so anyway, as I said, not to throw shade at any one place, but I had to take a step back and just kind of take a break from that part of the scene. it's been a couple of years, and I decided, I miss it. I want to get back into it, but I want to do it in a fashion that will allow me to, rather than being somewhere to sell my merch, to promote my shirts or my podcast. I want a place where people can come up to the booth and tell me about their experience. If they want it recorded, I want to be able to record it right then and there as they're talking about it, and stitch it all together and put together an hour, 3 hours, whatever it may be, of people's experiences and go from there. So when I saw that you were entering back into the arena, as it were, it did a couple of things. One, my fiance is from Kim Bolton, which is just a couple of towns over from Newcomerstown.
Right.
She actually worked at Salt Fork for 20 plus years. She worked on a lot of the banquets, was always a part of when the Ohio Bigfoot Conference came in. She was a big part of navigating that for the lodge. She has since moved to northern Indiana with me. And kind of, for our story, comes full circle. But when I saw the ad for the Newcomerstown event, she worked in Newcomerstown up until the time she moved to northern Indiana. So I was like, that would be really neat. Be able to go back there. She could spend time with her family. I can do the conference. And so that's how we got here.
Okay, cool.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the event this year is the 25th. It's the 25th one that I've hosted. And I don't know that there will be one next year, but at this time, there isn't one in the planning stages. I don't plan on having another one after this year. And I'll get into more soon as to why, I decided to have another one this year. But this one that we're having this year is going to be the 25th Annual Bigfoot Conference.
And did you take some time off?
Oh, I took a lot of time off, yeah. Between the year 2013, I believe it was, that was about the last time, maybe 2014, 15 there. I think the last conference that I hosted was in 2015 at Salt Fork. And then I took, I said, that's it. The heck with it. I'm not doing it anymore. Let somebody else do it. I don't need the aggravation. I'm not doing this for a pat on the back or to make $1 million. God knows there's not $1 million to be made doing a Bigfoot conference.
Well, brother, I feel you in that. As I said, I did two conferences that I put together based on the Dewey Lake Monster. It was called Bigfoot and Brews. Both years, it was very, very well received. It was popular. We had great turnout. At the time, I was single, and both my kids had moved on and were doing their own jobs. I didn't have anybody except a couple of trusted people that I could bounce ideas off of. Putting that together, securing the speakers, getting the money, paying for flights, setting up vendors, the whole thing.
Right.
Man, what a lot of work. And a lot of stress. So, brother, for having done that for that many years, kudos to you.
Well, thank you. But yeah, I mean, it was the thing of, I wanted to continue to do it year after year because I wanted to continue to get different people in here. You mentioned earlier about having possibly the same person over and over and over and over again, speaking year after year after year. One of my rules of thumb was do not have the same person speak back-to-back years. Yeah. Unless they've discovered the body, unless they have one in captivity, unless they've been abducted by UFOs, now they have the holy grail as to what the Sasquatch creature is.
Yeah.
And I mean, what is the purpose other than inviting a friend back to speak again? What is the purpose of having the same person 2 years or more in a row to give a presentation at your conference, other than maybe 10% of the people that will attend next year didn't see them this year, and those 10% are now happy because they said they can say that they saw whoever at the Bigfoot conference this year. I just, when you're working on a limited budget, it's just, you've got to watch where you put all your eggs in what basket, and you've got to make sure you're going to be. Look, I'll give you a little bit of background history in about 30 seconds or less in a nutshell. March of 1989, I held the first annual Bigfoot conference in Newcomerstown. We were going to have myself, Ron Schaffner, and I honestly don't remember who the other ones were. I think there was a fellow from West Virginia that was invited. There was a fellow from Pennsylvania invited. I wanted to get everybody from Ohio and every adjoining state together in one location, one evening, and talk about what the average size of footprints were for Ohio, the average size of footprints for West Virginia, the average size of footprints for Pennsylvania. The same way with what is the most typical color that people are reporting? What is the most typical characteristic, the mannerisms, the activities of the Sasquatch that people have spotted? What is the most typical activity that the Sasquatch was doing in Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, and Kentucky, and Indiana, and Michigan when it was spotted? That's why I wanted to put together a conference. So within 2 weeks of when that conference was to be held in early March of 1989, 3 of the 4 people I had invited to speak had to cancel.
Oh.
You talk about running around with your head spinning like a possessed baby doll. I had to really think, okay, now who can I get? I mean, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. So I did get some people together. I got Betty Parks from Eaton, Ohio. Her and her husband, Leon, had done a considerable amount of research, not only in western and southwestern Ohio, but also up in Michigan. I got John Rigoli, formerly of St. Clairsville, Ohio, who was at that point in time what I considered a really great eyewitness of a creature that he had spotted less than 100 feet away from his house in Belmont County. I got a fellow by the name of Art Caruso of Youngstown, Ohio, who was a paranormal researcher, not only on Bigfoot, but on haunted houses, crop circles, and things of that sort. And of course myself, but I didn't really consider myself a speaker. I was just the organizer / host of the event. And so we got all those people together. We held the first annual conference. We held it. It lasted probably 3 hours, and we had what I considered at that point in time to be a spectacular turnout of about 60 people. And we said, after everybody had cleared the room, and the next day came along and we had time to scratch our heads and wonder what had just happened, do you think this would be a very productive event once again next year? And people said yes. So I held one in 1990, and I held one in 1991, 92, and you get the idea. Now, the first time that we brought a person in from a long distance was a lady by the name of Bonnie Stump. And she lived in a town called Stewart's Draft, Virginia. And she wrote a magazine once a month, magazine-type newsletter, on paranormal events happening all across North America. So I decided to bring her in because I knew of her because she subscribed to my newsletter at the time. The following year, we decided to bring the first person in from a long ways off, and I mean more than a few hundred miles, and we brought Dr. Jeff Meldrum in. So Dr. Meldrum can actually blame me for being the person that got him started in Bigfoot conferences. I'm pretty sure of that. And I've had him here several times to speak, and he does a stellar job every time he comes back.
I just had the pleasure of doing just about a 3-hour episode with him about a month ago. Very, very nice. Very. I've met him in person a couple of times. Had a very embarrassing story. I went down to his booth at Salt Fork maybe 3 years ago to pick up a couple of casts that I wanted for my collection. And we got into a conversation, and one thing led to another, and next thing I knew, I was walking away from his table with the cast in my hand, and he literally had to stop me and say, "Hey, I know we got kind of off on a tangent with the talking, but you forgot to pay for the cast." And I was absolutely mortified that he had to step in and remind me that I had not paid. But
yeah. There's always that possibility, because as many times as you meet up with people and you talk to them, it's just, you get involved in conversation and, it just slips your mind.
Yep.
But, we held that 97 conference with Meldrum here. And then, I don't remember what month the 97 conference was in. I think it was still March. A few months later, in May of 97, I spoke at the Sasquatch Symposium event out there at Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Went back out to the Pacific Northwest in 1998 just to visit some friends and look at the territory more, because I'm a Midwestern guy in Ohio, and I hadn't gotten outside of the area within 500 miles of home for very many times at all. And so I had done that. Long story short, I hosted 24 events. This one coming up is going to be number 25. Believe it or not, marriages have come about as people throughout the years of people meeting each other and getting together and liking each other, and so they got married. Divorces have probably come about too, but I don't want credit for those. And there have been so many eyewitnesses that have come forward and told their stories about their encounters at the conference. I couldn't begin to tell you how many have attended and talked about what they had seen. And the total number of people that have attended since I held the conference was, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands of people. I don't know, whatever. But I will say one thing that I'm very proud of, and I'm still very proud of to today. And that is, I have never, ever had to charge a substantial amount of money for someone to walk through the door to get into the conference. There was one year that I asked for a donation of maybe $10 or $15. Had a hard time even getting people to donate 10 or 15 bucks. And I have never charged a dime for a person to walk through the door. And this year will be no different. There will not be an admission charge at this event on September 27th. Now, if you want to put a donation in the bucket, that's great. I deeply appreciate it, because there are costs associated with this, as you know.
Yes,
but I have never asked for people to pay a flat out admission fee to walk through the door and hear a speaker give a presentation. So, but anyway, that's a little bit of a background on how the conference began back in March of '89.
That in itself is impressive, especially in today's day and age. So I guess I need to thank you ultimately, because had you not started what turned into the Ohio Bigfoot Conference at one point, I would not have gone to Salt Fork. Thusly, I would not have met the woman that I have fallen in love with and recently got engaged to. So thank you.
And just make the check out to Don Keating, and we'll be happy. Just spell my last name correctly, because a lot of people spell it incorrectly. But yeah, it's that's funny you mentioned that, because when I in the past had given public presentations or held the conference or whatever, and somebody will probably ask me this again in late September, if they'll ask me a simple question like, well, if somebody wants to get involved in the investigations or the research, what would you suggest to them? And I tell them this from the bottom of my heart with a straight look on my face. The answer would be a very simple: don't get involved in it, because it's going to cause you a lot more aggravation and cost a lot more money than what you can imagine in the long run. So just sit back in the shadows on the sidelines, watch the events take place and unfold, and just do it as a bystander.
It is it's a wonderful topic to be involved with. It is incredibly interesting. The people can be wonderful. The communities can be divisive as all get out. Conferences seem to me to be that happy medium where no matter what your attitude is, conferences seem to be a place where everybody kind of comes together.
Right.
You know, the divisiveness of Facebook and the different groups, and, you know, the apers versus the non-apers, and all the different stuff, and the arguments, and the, you know, the know-it-alls, and if it's not this way, it's the wrong way. That all seems to kind of dissipate and go by the wayside at conferences.
I held a conference at the building back in 2004 that I'm going to be at again this year, the David Barber Civic Center in Newcomerstown.
Mm-hmm.
And I kid you not, I was doing an interview with a reporter out of WSYX Channel 6 in Columbus, Ohio. And there was two guys that had attended the conference that were dressed head to toe in silver aluminum foil with some kind of strainer that served as a helmet on top of their head with two aluminum antennae sticking
Lord.
at the top of their helmets. And they were there at the entire conference. So that's one of those oddball stories that, you know, anybody is welcome to attend, and everybody has an opinion, and everybody has their own theories as to what this thing could be or whatever. I don't think they shot any B-roll footage of those guys for that news piece, thank God. But they did get some B-roll footage of someone who was sitting in the audience sleeping.
Oh.
So I was very appreciative of that. Yeah, you get some interesting folks at the events, that's for sure.
So ultimately, at some point, early 2000s, mid 2000s, you handed off the conference to Mark DeWorth, who now runs the Ohio Bigfoot Conference.
Correct.
When you made that handoff, and in fact, I believe you were at the speakers dinner the last year that I attended the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. You were in you were with the group of speakers that were sitting at the different tables. And I never did get an opportunity to talk to you there. We had a very quick meeting of the eyes, and I said hi, and you said hi, and that was essentially it. But so when you handed that off, were there traditions that you wanted to see preserved? Was there any, here, you take this, but I want you to continue to XYZ, or was it just a handoff and make your go of it?
Mark and I didn't have a nearly in-depth enough of a conversation for it to be at the stage today that I would have liked to have seen it. At that point in time, I wanted to just unload it. I was going to close it down altogether, period. I didn't really care, because again, if you're doing this for a pat on the back, you might as well forget it, because you're going to break your own arm several times patting your own self on the back.
Right.
Nobody's going to do it. Nobody's going to do it for you. You'll be lucky if you get a dozen people walk up to you at the end of the night and say, "Hey, thanks for hosting this. I really appreciate it. I learned something, blah, blah, blah." It does not work that way, period. Okay, so I would like to see some things change with the conference the way it is now. Obviously, I do not have full control of the conference. I don't have any control of the conference at all. But that's why I handed it over to Mark, because I didn't want anything else to do with it.
Yeah.
If it ever gets to a point where I think the integrity of the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, which was formerly known as the Annual Bigfoot Conference, if it looks like it's about to go down the toilet, he'll receive a phone call and we will have a conversation. But until then, I'm just going to let him do his thing, and because I have no say over it. I don't know how much he respects or appreciates the fact that I hosted it for all those years until I handed it over to him. But that's okay. I would say 1% of the general public appreciate what I have done in the past, but that's fine. Like I said, you're not doing it for a pat on the back. But yeah, so I think I answered your question fairly.
You did. You did.
I don't really care unless it looks like a train wreck for Ringling Brothers. I don't really care. I don't really care what he does with it, as long as he doesn't make it into a debacle.
Yeah.
And then that's when, like I say, that's when he'll get a private phone call from me and we'll have a conversation. Because I am the one, after all, that founded the thing back in 1989, and I am the one who has hosted more conferences than anybody in the United States. I got a little bit of experience under my belt as to what to and what not to do to make them successful, and to withhold the integrity of the event.
What have you noticed? I mean, I'm sure that you must keep an eye on that conference as the years go by. What change has there been, if any, in the caliber of the witnesses or researchers now that it's been, over 2 decades of people coming in and talking?
Of the event itself, period?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like I said, back in the 89 and into 90, 91, et cetera, I held it to try, I think up till the year about 2004, thereabouts, I was hosting it to try and hold a mixture of speakers that would be inclusive of eyewitnesses as well as researchers, the people that have done the actual so-called grunt work in the field, but also the people who have claimed to have seen the creature, no matter at what distance. And like I said, I was out of it for a long time, and I'm still relatively out of it, but I hadn't done anything. I hadn't even attended the conference out at Salt Fork for quite some time. The first conference that Mark hosted that after I handed it over to him was in 2012 at the Pritchard Laughlin Civic Center in Cambridge, because Salt Fork Lodge wasn't available. Mm-hmm. But then afterwards, the conference moved back out to Salt Fork and it was available. A little history on how that conference started taking place at Salt Fork. There might be some people that don't know the full story, but I'm going to give it to you in a nutshell. In 2004, I hosted the conference in Newcomerstown at the David Barber Civic Center. And within a couple of days after that, I had a gentleman who worked at Salt Fork contact me. He said, "We'd like to know if you'd be interested in holding the conference out here, because we understand that you're getting a pretty good crowd, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Sure, I'll come out and meet you, and you can show me what your rooms look like, and you can show me how many rooms you got and what kinds of amenities there are available for the general public who attend the conference, and so on." And they made a good sales pitch. I said, "Okay, we'll hold it out here next year for the first time." And that was in 2005. And with the exception of 2012, it's been held at Salt Fork Lodge ever since then. What I would like to see as far as the event is concerned is more people who have legitimately seen this thing come forward and be given the stage for however long that they need, up to a certain reasonable amount of time, to tell about what they've seen. Because after all, that's one of the reasons I started holding the conference, was to get people to come forward. I held it at a monthly Bigfoot meeting in Newcomerstown from July of 1985 until I don't know when. It was over 20 years. And the reason I held that was because up in Alliance, Ohio, there was a meeting up there that started in the 1970s called the Tri-County UFO Study Group. Jim Rastetter and Paul Rozick founded that event. And myself and Tom Archer went up there one night to one of their meetings. And on the way back, I'm thinking to myself, these guys have a support group for people who claim to have an alien abduction or who claim to have seen a UFO. Why isn't there one of these types of groups for people who claim to have seen a Bigfoot? And so that's what I did. I wanted to hold a one-time meeting in July of '85, hoping people would come forward, give us some new information, and give us some hot leads so we could maybe get a better track on where this thing could be the Bigfoot at that time. It turned out that it was an overwhelming success with people coming through the door and telling their stories left, right, and every which way but loose. And that's why we held the Tri-State. It started out as the Eastern Ohio Bigfoot Study Group, and it went to the Tri-State Bigfoot Study Group because I wanted to expand the name so we could get more people from Pennsylvania and West Virginia, because the name sounded Eastern Ohio Bigfoot Study Group. Maybe they thought, well, people who have seen something in Ohio and Pennsylvania or West Virginia, maybe they're not welcome to tell their stories. Well, just to the opposite. They were more than welcome to tell their stories. So that's why we held that event.
So if you had an opportunity to redesign the modern Bigfoot conference from scratch, from ground up, let's say it's your event that's going to be this September, or let's say it's the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. You would like to see something more akin to a more structured town hall where somebody was given the opportunity to talk about their experience in front of a group of people rather than having to pay for the opportunity to go into a closed room setting and watch a paid speaker present the same thing they've presented for the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, that would be one way of putting it, yes. When I held the conference, and like I said, I've held it every year without charging an admission charge, then I would just like to see that continue on. So, I mean, if you got a family of 4 people, look at the cost, plus the accommodations, staying at the lodge at Suffolk or somewhere else if the lodge is full. You're talking several $100s just for a weekend event.
Oh, absolutely.
I just, like I said, I have the thought process that I didn't start it to make a ton of money. I started it for the reason that I want to find an answer to the the question. Does it or does it not exist in Ohio? And holding a conference, charging $95 or however many dollars you charge for a VIP ticket is not the way to find the answer. The way to find the answer is to get out there into the woods and look for the thing, field the reports and do the research. If you really got down to the brass tacks of it, you want to have another weekend where you can look for it, don't hold the conference at all.
And ultimately,
plain and simple. I was born in Ohio, but I take the attitude I'm from Missouri, the show me state.
Yeah.
You want to prove something to me? Let's see your evidence. If you want to prove something exists, get your butt out there in the field on a regular basis, and don't advertise days, weeks, or months in advance where you're going to be. Get out in the field, do your stuff, and try to find an answer to the dang question. Does it or does it not exist? That's what we did for years and years and years. We went out to the field. We took our micro cassette recorders with us. I preached every time. You get out of my car, you better have a tape recorder recording, because if you don't, and 30 seconds later we hear a noise that sounds ungodly, I'm going to ask you, did you get it on tape? Well, I think I forgot the batteries at home. Then go home. Plain and simple. You see something walking across the road 50 yards in front of you, and I had my back to you, and you tell me about it. How long did you see it? 5 seconds. Did you get a picture? I forgot to buy the film for the camera. Really? Go home. I don't mean to sound shrewd about it, but as Renee DeHenden said, you're dealing with one of the biggest anthropological and physiological events, undiscovered animals of mankind. And if you're not going to go out there to look for the thing the way it should be looked for, there's no reason for you to do it. I also like to paraphrase him on this, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying this, but he says, don't go out into the forest looking for Bigfoot behind every pineapple tree, because you're going to see it behind every pineapple tree. You don't go out into the field looking for Bigfoot thinking, well, guess what? Just because there was a sighting out there on road XYZ a month ago, we're going to see it again.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're not. Because 5 minutes after that witness seen that creature cross road X, Y, and Z, it's long gone, folks. You ain't going to see it again unless you're extremely lucky. And if you're that lucky, you better start playing the lottery. When I started doing this stuff back in 1984, I was like, dang, how does John Green, how does Grover Krantz, how does Peter Byrne, how does Rene DeHenden do this? And at that time, they had only been into it for like 20 or 25 years. I say only because that sounds like a small number for me now. But they had been into it for 20, 25 years. I'm thinking, like, how do they do this without losing their sanity? And I've had the opportunity to stay at John Green's house 3 days and 2 nights and look through all of his index cards, all of his plaster castings, all the maps on his walls that had every pinpoint location across British Columbia and Alberta, Washington, Oregon, northern Idaho, Montana, pinpointed. And they did it every year because they continued with the hope that that report that they fielded would be the inevitable answer to the question. I used to think that, well, no, you don't have to go out and bag a Sasquatch to prove that a Sasquatch exists. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I had the privilege of sitting beside Dr. Grover Krantz, right beside him, 2 feet away from him. We sit there and just talked at the symposium in 1997, while everybody else is inside listening to somebody talk about UFO abductions. And I asked him, I said, no, I've asked you this question before, Grover, but I'm going to ask you again. Since I'm sitting here in person with you, I'd like to hear the words come straight out of your mouth, and I can see your mouth moving. What would you require for the scientific proof to say a Sasquatch exists? And Grover told me, he said, you need a substantial part of the body. If you find a dead one laying in the woods and you've got the ability to take parts of, if you don't have the ability to take the entire body out and you can take the extremities, do that and then get the heck out of there. And I said, what do you mean the extremities? He said, 2 hands, 2 feet, and a head. And if you can do that and you can stomach getting it, you better get out fast. And I said, well, why is that? He said, because where there's one, there's more than one. And if you just dissected Uncle Joe, his nephew's not going to be too happy about it.
Could you imagine?
Yeah. And so that's what he told me. DeHenden had a slightly different opinion. John Green had a slightly different opinion. I had John Green at my regular meeting of the Eastern Ohio Bigfoot Study Group in January of 1970 or 1989. And he stood there and he talked for an hour and a half to the audience. There was a decent audience turnout then. Of course, it was in January, but it would have been nice to have seen 300 or 400 people show up to hear what he had to say. Unfortunately, he's gone now. Mm-hmm. And the stories that he told at that meeting, as well as the stories that he told me at his house and all this, are what I would consider to be quote unquote priceless. So I don't mean to go off on a tangent on different aspects of it, but I can understand how those 4 guys got so riled when they see a newbie go out into the field and they think they have the answer and that their way is going to be the way to prove a Sasquatch exists. Well, maybe it is, but don't brag about it and boast about it until it happens, because nothing is a guaranteed thing. The only two guaranteed things in life, you know what they are? Death and taxes.
Yep.
I don't look forward to either one of them.
That is very true.
So as DeHenden or as Peter Byrne would say, onward.
Considering you've spent so much of your life in Ohio, to you, what would be, let's say, the single best piece of Ohio evidence to date?
Well, first you would have to classify what evidence is. If evidence is a footprint or a plaster cast of a footprint or a series of footprints, as I hear the theme song for Jeopardy in the back of my mind on Final Jeopardy. I'm sorry, Alex, I'm going to lose this one.
Well, I mean,
I really don't think there's that much in the way of really earth-shaking evidence from Ohio to begin with. I believe the creature is here. If it wasn't at one time, it is, or if it isn't now, it was at one time. There have been some spectacular sightings that have been turned into me. I guess let's just say, let's say that some of these sightings are evidence, which they're not, but that's the first part of a trial.
And
you have to have an eyewitness.
It would be considered anecdotal evidence.
Right. Okay, so let's say some of the best anecdotal evidence would be this. The Minerva Monster. Mm-hmm. The Rome, Ohio episode of events that took place in 1981. Minerva that took place in 1978. I'm not quite sure about MacArthur in Southern Ohio because there was some, I want to tell you something, there was some really weird stuff that took place in MacArthur, and I believe the year was 1978. There was some bizarre stuff that took place down there. Myself, Tom Archer, and several friends of his went down there, and I don't remember what the year was. It was in the mid to late 1980s to MacArthur, to the A-frame house that was so well known, to the experimental forest. Let me tell you something. The experimental forest is not for the weak-minded or for the weak, not minded, but what's the word I'm looking? It's not for the person that gets scared easily.
What can we expound on that? Can you talk more about that?
Sure. You walk through the experimental forest. There's not supposed to be anybody in there, right?
And
There's not supposed to be a single person in the experimental forest at all. We're talking about Wayne National Forest here.
For people that don't know what the experimental forest is, can you give just a little bit of background on that?
Well, the way I understand it, and it'll be very brief because I'm not up on too much of it, but I believe, if I understood it correctly, it was in Wayne National Forest, and the Mead Paper Company, located in Chillicothe, owned it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we go in there. We go in there when there's plenty of daylight. We walk this trail. I think one of the guys was armed, but I wouldn't swear to it. But I'm happy that they were, because in the experimental forest, supposedly rabbits go in their normal size and they come out 3 or 4 times bigger than they're supposed to be. But that being said, we walk around. There is not, I kid you not, there's 2 really weird events that took place in the experimental forest, and I was a firsthand, number one, eyewitness to both of these, and they still kind of make me a little nervous every time I think about them. The first thing that happened was we're walking along, and the valleys are really deep. I mean, you're dropping a couple 300 feet to get down to the creek down below where you're walking out on the road, right? This is in an area where there's nobody that lives. There's no houses, there's no tents, there's no nothing. It's private property, so to speak. Suddenly you see floating lights that have no rhyme or reason, no connection to any person, and apparently no connection to any flashlight, because we yelled down at them several times to let them know that we were up where we were at, and there wasn't a single response. Floating lights. I remember them very vividly. They were bluish white and yellowish white in color. And they didn't bounce up and down like they would when a person would typically walk through the woods or down a street or whatever. Yeah. They just floated like an orb, so to speak. Now, when we got out of the area, thank God, and started going back, Tom says, "Hey, let's stop at the A-frame house." Oh, okay, sure. So we stop at the A-frame house, and of course it's an A-frame. We walked up to it because it was abandoned at this point in time. We look in the 2 doors, 2 sliding glass doors, and we can see the moonlight that was shining on some stuff because there were lights, ceiling lights that let in the moonlight at night. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this bluish white, for lack of better terms, light materializes out of nowhere. and floats around inside the A-frame house. And then it just disappears.
Really?
And so you gotta say to yourself, what in Sam Hill am I doing investigating this kind of stuff?
So
there's no logical answer for it. There was nobody there. Where did it come from? Where did it go? And it wasn't self-luminescent. I shouldn't say that. It wasn't one of these lights where it would shine a beam down to the floor to see where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a bluish white.
There was illumination, but it wasn't anything direct.
Yeah, it didn't shine on things to make it look like there was a flashlight shining on, like the fireplace.
You know, Don, in one of my in one of the most early paranormal investigations that I had done, it was just thrown together. It was something that my kids grew up watching Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and stuff like that, and we had a very old, very small cemetery that was not far from the house. Summer night, it was beautiful night. It was dark. We went out there about 10:30. We got to the gates, and I told my I told my kids and a couple of their friends, I said, listen, we're not here to screw around. We're not here to be disrespectful. I said, let's just go in. Remember that we are walking in an area that people are laid to rest, and let's respect that. Let's just see if we can experience anything. And we had a couple of things happen throughout the night, but the most significant thing we had made our way to the back of the cemetery and then worked our way back forward to by where the car was. Excuse me. And near the end of it, my daughter had called me and back into this one corner of the cemetery, and there were two very large trees. And then when you walk between those trees, there were one or two, maybe three monuments. And my daughter had said, Dad, come back here. I think she was like 14 or 15. She says, it's really cold back here. And I, thinking to myself, of course, you've been watching Ghost Adventures and all these things, but sure, it's cold. So I walked between those trees to go back to where she was. And sure enough, as soon as I walked between those trees, the temperature was considerably lower. Now, as I said before, this was about 10:30, 11, maybe going on 11 o'clock. So it was dark. Sun hadn't been beating down on that property for hours. So walking from where I was to where she was, that difference in temperature was pretty significant and very noticeable. I had a camcorder in one hand that was filming, and I had a Kodak digital camera in my other hand, which I was taking pictures with. But I had the camcorder was rolling, and we stood there in front of this monument that might have been 6 feet tall. Kind of reminded me of the Washington Monument, very, very tall, narrow, with a kind of a pyramid at the top of it. And it was polished. I assume it was granite. And as we were standing there, I wasn't looking at the viewfinder in the camcorder, but it was pointed to it. And luckily, as this happened, I was pointed at that, so I got it on film. And what we saw was about maybe a little bit smaller than the size of a golf ball, which came out of absolute thin air in front of us. It, much like what you just said, it had an illumination to it, but it did not illuminate anything around it. It was like a self-illuminated, but there was nothing about the light source that was glowing on anything else. And it came into our perception, and it zipped around in a, kind of like a figure eight, and then just burned out. It just poof, it was gone. And my daughter, who, like I said, was 14, maybe 15, standing there beside me going, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. Did you see that? And, you know, I mean, I love my daughter, and I'm not stupid. I know that she talks like that, but, you know, at that point you're wanting to correct her and say, hey, don't talk like that. But what we saw was holy shit, because there was a light source that came out of nothing, out of nowhere. It wasn't a firefly. It wasn't a bug. It wasn't a moth that got, you know, a light was shining on it and it just flickered. This thing came out of nowhere on its own, zipped around, and then poof, was gone. And I ended up taking that recording. I still cannot bring myself to throw away the hard drive that it is on, but I have not been able to access that hard drive for about 10 years now. I still have it. I could take you into my house right now. I could show you where that hard drive is, but I can't access that video. But I had, at the time, I had slowed the film down at 25, 50, and 75% of the original speed. And even at 75% of the original speed, it was maybe 3.5 seconds worth of footage. It was that fast, where it came out of nowhere, turned into a small ball of light, zipped around, and then poof, it was gone.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like, you know, what we seen down there at the A-frame. It just appeared and kind of like moved around a little bit, and then it just disappeared, you know.
As far as you're concerned, when you start getting into stories like what we just talked about, where does your head lie on the idea of, I don't mean necessarily whether or not you think these things are paranormal or if they are aliens or if they're traversing through portals or anything like that. But, you know, when you do start to consider a sizable portion of many encounters do seem to include things that we would consider to be even more odd, even more, I guess paranormal is the best phrase, but I don't mean it in ghosty stuff. It's just beyond what our normal scope of understanding is.
Right.
Where do you fall with that?
Well, you know, after whether being involved full time or just behind the shadows, so to speak, for 40 years plus, you know, you can't just ignore it, sweep it under the rug, and say it doesn't exist. That being said, there's got to be something out there that is considered the definitive proof as to whether or not Sasquatch exists. Now, if that something is a flying saucer that hovers over Rome, Ohio, lets the beam down to the cornfield, and a Bigfoot creature comes out of the beam and walks through the cornfield, then so be it. At least we have an answer.
Yeah.
But I've heard numerous stories. I had a lot of people attend my Tri-County or Tri-State Bigfoot Study Group, my Eastern Hot Bigfoot Study Group back in the day, who were avid UFO believers. I mean, they were avid. And when I attended the Tri-County UFO Study Group and Alliance, they were more avid up there than what they were at my Bigfoot meeting. And I cannot look at a person and say, you're wrong. And I won't look at a person and say you're wrong, because everybody has a reason for their theory or for their belief or for their idea or whatever the case may be it all the reports that they've heard, all of the investigations they've done, or all of the experiences that they've had. They have in their own mind a reason for why they believe the way they do as to what the definitive answer is to what this thing is, or where it's from, or whatever the case may be. I will never tell anybody that they're incorrect, because that's very disrespectful, for one thing, and I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, it's incredibly dismissive.
Yeah, so you can't tell them. It's like Ron Schaffner used to use a saying, and they use it at the Tri-County UFO Study Group: ridicule without investigation is the crown of ignorance upon the head of a fool. So, I mean, no matter how much you investigate, although I will say that I've heard of a few stories from Pennsylvania where somebody was out in the forest, they had a shotgun with them, they seen a Bigfoot in the distance, they shot at it, there was a flashlight, and lo and behold, the thing disappeared. Well, I'm not an avid hunter, I don't even hunt, I don't own a gun, but correct me if I'm wrong, but when you shoot a shotgun, isn't there a little flash of light that comes out of it?
Absolutely.
You know, so maybe the creature disappeared pretty quick before it got a chance to come rip your head off for shooting at it, or before you got another shot off at it, and you might have just thought that the thing disappeared into a bright flash of light because you were so scared to death to begin with, you took a shot at it.
Yeah.
So, you know, I could dismiss a couple reports like that saying that, you know, I don't think they disappeared in a flash of light. They could have, but I wasn't there, so I can't say definitively one way or the other. But all I know is, for as many years as this thing has been talked about across North America, around the world, there's got to be something out there. Rene DeHenden said one time, and I'm not going to paraphrase him because I'm not going to use the profanity, but he said, there's got to be something making them footprints.
Yeah.
You can go back even before 1958 for the Jerry Crew incident. You know, there's got to be something making those footprints. And if you take, John Green said, take every sighting report in my file, in my index files, and throw them out as misidentification, as a hoax, as whatever you want to say. Throw every one of them out, with the exception of one. And if that one is a legitimate, true to earth sighting of what we call a Sasquatch creature, guess what? We have a problem.
Yep.
And that problem is there's something out there. And I don't know of anyone who has been able to throw every single sighting out.
You used the word misidentification, and that led me to something that I wanted to get into with you. If you could take us back to September of '85, what exactly did you see on that night?
While we were out there, we were using a recording that Tom Archer had with him. It was a dramatization of what people think is a Bigfoot sound. So we were playing it time and time again. This is an area in far northern Guernsey County, 4 miles south of Newcomerstown, where there had been, and it wasn't by me, but there had been countless sightings, track discoveries, animals coming up missing right on this small area of land. And we played the sound over and over again. There were 4 of us, myself, Tom Archer, one of the residents who had lived out there, and another researcher from Northeast Ohio. Myself and Tom were at the front end of his car in the driveway. The third researcher was up at I believe it was in southeast corner of an old dilapidated barn with the resident. So those 2 guys were up there, and Tom and I were at the front end of his car. And there are goldenrod weeds. Anybody that's familiar with them knows they grow 4 to 5 feet high at their fullest during the fall, early fall. Goldenrod weeds that covered that entire open field there to the north of the property, or the north end of the property between the barn and the house. And something caught my attention that was starting to come into that field of goldenrod weeds. And here's a perfect example as to being caught off guard. I had a 35 millimeter Shannon camera hanging around my neck with the flash on, hanging around my neck with the flash on. This thing walks towards me, and I yelled at it 3 or 4 times. I think I said Mark or something to that effect. I said, Mark, I'm down here. And it just kept walking like towards the chicken pen that was out there. And it stopped a short distance from the chicken pen, and then it walked straight away from me toward the northeast, about twice as fast as it had come toward the chicken pen. And it was very light in color. And it was a good bit taller than what those goldenrod weeds were. I would say that the waist of the thing was as high as the goldenrod, and the goldenrod was between 4 and 5 feet high. And to prove the fact that something had walked through that field, the next day, myself and the Northeast Ohio researcher went back out there, and we found a very clear trail at the exact location from where I seen it walk into the field, walk to the chicken pen, and then walk away twice as fast as it had come down into the area of the chicken pen. And again, that was September 15th of 85 at 10:04 p.m., give or take a couple minutes. And the reason I mentioned the camera is I never even thought, I forgot about the camera hanging around my neck.
Mm-hmm.
If I had been to my wit's end, or to my, thinking logically, I would have picked it up and snapped a picture in that area. Now, if it was something else, I might have got a little aggravated or whatever because a flash was just shot in this direction. It might have been a different story. But that could have been a Sasquatch. I don't know. I know it was big enough. I know it was tall enough. I know it was walking quite rapidly when it walked away, because there have been numerous sightings out there. There was one night when the researcher from Northeast Ohio and one of the residents, the same 2 guys that, in fact, that were up at the corner of the barn that night, they were sitting on the steps at the back side of the house. Not my story, theirs. They both verified it together and individually. At one point in time, they were looking out across an open field that had high weeds in it, 3 feet high or whatever. And at one point in time, they seen no less than 6 sets of self-luminescent red glowing eyes at different heights at the same time. And my response to them is the same response you're having right now.
Yeah. I
had no idea what to say about that. I couldn't look at them and say, what kind of wacky tobacco were you guys smoking? But they were straight as an arrow because they were drinking pop and they didn't do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you've heard of lightning bugs. You've heard of glowworms. Those are 2 creatures that we know exist, tiny little things, and they're self-luminescent. Why can't a Sasquatch have something in its makeup, its eyes, that at some point in time or another, their eyes let off a glow like a firefly does or like a glowworm does? There's not a single place on the face of the earth that is 100% dark at night. Not a single place, no matter where you go. You have to go subterranean to get to complete darkness, such as a cave, because there's plenty of ambient light out there. If your eyes are adjusted well enough, even if it's on a clear night, you're going to get ambient light. If it's on a cloudy night, you're going to get even more ambient light because the cloud cover will keep the light from nearby towns from being shot up out into space. So I guess my point is, there is light that is out there for creatures that have the ability to make their eyes shine at night, or their bodies or whatever, like the glowworm. And so I used to think, well, man, that's really bizarre. Well, it's not so bizarre, because I can look at fireflies and glowworms every year. They're not bizarre. You just got to know where to look for them. They have a way of doing that. Well, in the back of the eye, there is what they call, I believe it's called the tapetum. It's a mirror in the back of every person's eye. And that used to be why you always got red eye shine from Aunt Mary when you shot a photo of her at Christmas time in her best looking sweater. And she says, I got red eyes. Well, yeah, I know, but sorry, I couldn't do anything about it because the flash reflected off the back of the mirror in the back of the eye. So did I answer your question adequately, or did I go off on a tangent again?
You might have gone on a tangent, but I think it's all good because, I mean, ultimately we're here just to have a discussion about, the weirdness and what the hell these things are.
I've been doing this since 1984. I was interested in it in 1980. I wrote an article for the Newcomerstown News in October of 80 about some incidents that were taking place at Lake Lila, 4 miles southwest of where I live. And then I got out of it, and then I read John Green's book. I always blame John for making me totally crazy, and he said, "You're welcome." But I've got, if you've seen my basement and know how many videotapes are in my basement, or how many audio tapes are in my basement, photos, I've got all that stuff. And we still don't have an answer to the question as to whether or not it exists. Think about that one the next time you go to the library.
You bring up that point. And I don't know. Do I want to know what it is? Yes, absolutely. Do I want to know definitively if we have been led astray and it's just been an absolute pile of horse dung, or if there is something to it? Do I necessarily need to know what it is? No. But I do need to know if it exists or not. Because, in the job that I do, my job is to talk to people who have had experiences.
Right.
And
now you've not that I didn't mean to interrupt you, but then that brings up an interesting question that I posed to you as being as a questioner for the past 40 plus years of witnesses. And you're not necessarily a witness, but then I ask you this question, and you've talked to all these people on your show for the past few years. A real quick answer: does it or does it not exist?
Absolutely.
In your opinion?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There are people who have had experiences that are mundane and trivial, and to most people would probably seem like, so what? But to be honest with you, some of those experiences that the people that I've talked to, some of those are the more interesting to me, because I think it's one of the components of human nature is, I had an experience hunting where something was walking behind me. I could turn it into a classic, I was being paced out of the woods. At the time, I thought it was the landowner because I had ventured onto property that was not mine. Not to hunt it. I had left my weapon back at my tree stand on the property. I did have right to hunt. But it was just a very interesting piece of property. There was wetlands. There was grass that was obviously bedded down in from the deer. There was a significant area of white pines where the turkeys would roost. It was just a very interesting piece of property. As I was walking out of that property back to where I had the right to hunt, I started hearing something walk behind me. At first, for the first couple of minutes, I thought it was the landowner. I stopped. I clearly had my arms down at my side to show that I didn't have any weapon. I stood there. He never said anything. And so I started to walk again. When I started to walk, it started to walk. Halfway back to my hunting stand, even though Bigfoot was a part of my my enthusiasm and my enjoyment of all things weird and strange, what actually took over was I thought that I had a very large buck who decided to follow me back to my deer stand, thinking that I might had deer estrus on me from a previous hunting trip, and it was smelling that on me. So, yeah. So the rest of that story wound up being, I thought that this was by the time I got back to where I could reach my shotgun, this was the largest buck that southwestern Michigan had ever seen. And I was going to be all over the newspapers and whatever. I've only been hunting a couple of years, and I got this world record whitetail. At the point where it let go of a voluminous, very, very loud grunt, accompanied by a very large exhale of breath, kind of simultaneously. I mean, I couldn't repeat it, but it was a grunt and another noise, but then there was the sound of the actual exhale, and then I heard thump thump, and I had reached my gun. I had it pulled up, and I was getting ready to turn and expected to see a large buck within 20 feet of where I was standing. Well, I heard that voluminous exhale and that, and I heard thump thump, and I turned, and there was nothing there. And I stepped back onto the property that I didn't have rights to look in the direction that I heard it. I didn't see any twigs moving. I didn't see any leaves falling back down to the ground. I didn't see anything. I fully expected to see, a white tail sticking out of one side of a big tree and the nostrils and the nose of a deer sticking out of the other side of the tree, completely, keeping me from taking a shot.
Yeah.
But there was nothing. And kind of after I got my senses back, the beating of my heart and everything kind of slowed down a little bit. I decided, there was only a couple of minutes left of hunting light, so I decided to walk back to where my car was parked. And as I walked out of the woods and got into the field, I directly turned so that the wood line was on the left of me, and started walking back to my car, which was about 300 yards, maybe 350 yards away. As I was walking, I pulled my flashlight out off my utility belt, like Batman, and I shined it into the woods because I continued to hear something walking in the leaves along my left-hand side. And my son, if he listens to this, would attest. He and I both have fetishes for the best flashlights. I always looking for something smaller and brighter and more powerful. And we love flashlights, and we love multi-tools. That's what we spend a lot of our money on. And I had this flashlight, and it would light up the night. And 2/3 of the way back to my car, I heard this walking in the leaves just inside, maybe 10 feet, maybe 15 feet inside the tree line. I'm probably 5 yards outside of the tree line. And I never saw a damn thing move. I never saw a leaf get moved. I never saw a twig on one of the low-lying brush move. But yet I heard the crunch, crunch, crunch. Could I discern between bipedal and quadrupedal? I would like to think that I've spent enough time having a dog in my life that I know the difference between something that walks across the floor and sounds like it has 4 legs versus 2 legs. In the woods, instead of a hardwood floor, I don't know that you can really make that assessment. All I know is I continued to hear it 2/3 of the way back to my car, Never saw anything move, never saw a twig move, never saw any sign of life. And at about the point that I got near the back of the home that was the property that I was hunting on, the motion sensor picked me up and kicked on. Didn't shine directly at me. It shined more at their backyard, but it picked up my motion. It kicked on. And from that point to the rest of my journey to my car, I didn't hear another word or another sound. Was it Bigfoot? Have no idea. Probably not. Was it something? I clearly remember it. It left quite an impact on me. It wasn't until a couple of years later, maybe 3 years afterwards, that I kind of started putting together 2 and 2 with already having looked into how many people I've had discuss the same type of stuff. Again, for the most part, I thought it was a large deer that I just missed out on. But then it kind of started getting weird, and it kind of started playing on my brain. So I don't know, what was that?
Right. Yep.
So,
I've had an encounter similar to that way back in the late 80s, just south of Newcomerstown, when we were going to the what they call the Post Boy Tunnel. It was an old railroad bed. And I had someone who told me that they had also had an encounter where something seemed like it was just pacing them for a period of time. And it was the same way with us, because there were 4 of us out there, and we all 4 were very quiet and listening to our surroundings, and it sounded like something was pacing us as well. So who knows?
It's a bizarre, it's a very interesting thing. I love the mystery of it. I hope it is what I think it is.
Yeah.
And I would, without harm coming to it, would love to. I got to be careful how I word this, because if it was brought to light publicly, then the search is on even more so than it already is. And I think it deserves the respect of being left alone.
Uh-huh.
But I also think that as humanity deserves to know what this is. So if we could achieve that in encompassing both of those aspects, have the heart to at least recognize that it's real and be able to stay away from it and let it do its thing, that would be great. I don't think that it's possible.
Right.
But,
you got to remember that the silverback gorilla, as well as the panda, weren't scientifically accepted to exist until like the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And so, they had been around for eons, but yet science didn't get off of its soapbox until they had that evidence in their laboratory or in their zoo or whatever it was required to be. And I guess there is a little black and white bear that stands upright and eats bamboo shoots, and there is this big old gorilla that's got a silver back that could clean my clock in 3 seconds flat if it wanted to.
Well, we have here in northern Indiana, we have a dinosaur museum, which I did not expect it to be much. We went there on a whim, and it was a lot better than what I expected. I mean, it wasn't like you went to Chicago and the Field Museum or anything like that, but it was interesting, and they had a lot of really good exhibits in there.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that really got me was there was an animation, a very good computer animation of a silverback gorilla and the evolutionary transformation that would have taken place between that gorilla and what we consider to be modern man. And, you know, it kind of starts by stripping away the fur and then, you know, kind of peeling away the muscle structure, and you get to the bone, and as it gets to the skeletal system, then it starts transforming into the various different versions of us leading up to what would be present day man. And right. I pulled my cell phone out, and then after watching it 3 or 4 times, I pulled my cell phone out and I actually took a video of it because, you know, it in a sense, it makes it, you know, I had the opportunity to stand next to Shaquille O'Neal in person, 7'2". I'm 5'9" on a good day.
Yeah.
That is a significant difference in not only height, but in the prime, when he was in his prime, he was a very muscular, very robust individual.
Yeah.
And just the difference in size. And at 5'9", I've always been a stocky guy. I was always in my mid 220, 225 pound, even when I was in the best shape of my life and I used to fight as a bouncer in a bar. I was a small dude. And when you stand next to somebody that is that big, and then you relate that to so many people who have had eyewitness experiences with these things, calling in the neighborhood of 7 to 8 foot tall, and then the outliers that call in at 9 foot plus. I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Kreider out of New Mexico, a researcher, claims the individual that he has in his area of research crests well over 10 foot.
Mm-hmm.
And the exponential size increase from somebody that's 5'9" to 6'9" and 6'9" to 7'9". You're not just talking an extra 20 or 30 pounds because they have a foot more height. The weight exponentially increases because of the size and the frame. And man, to be able to stand there and witness something that would be man-like at 8 foot tall. The description of something at 6 to 7 to 800 pounds.
Yeah.
It really puts it into perspective that it's not that far out of reach. Because, any one of us can go into Walmart and see somebody at 350 to 400 pounds. They don't have that they don't have that weight, but they don't have that height, but that weight is, especially in America today.
Yeah.
It's not that far out of the realm of possibility.
And don't forget, you could always look up, and I had his name in my mind 30 seconds ago, and I forgot what it was. The world's tallest man. Mm-hmm. I think his first name was Waldo.
Yeah, he was in the Guinness Book of World Records. Yeah.
Yeah, 7'11" 3/4 inches tall.
Yeah.
And he wasn't fat.
No.
And you take a look at him, besides a quote unquote average sized person, and you're like, you hear a lot of reports where this thing is 8 foot tall and it's 3 feet across the shoulders, across the chest, and it's people estimate is several hundred pounds, 700-800 pounds, 900 pounds. The first question I would have is, where is it going to stay hidden?
Right.
And what in the world does this thing eat? And I know what the answer would be, but what does this thing eat to sustain all that mass? And I guess the answer would be whatever it wants. But as that's just, there's a lot more questions than what there are answers, I'm afraid. And I don't know how long it'll be until we get the answer that we need or want. I really don't.
I know we're coming up in about hour and a half here, and I still have a couple of things I'd like to ask you if you have the time. The Sasquatch Triangle. You're noted for having spent an inordinate amount of hours traversing the Sasquatch Triangle, researching that area. For the listeners who wouldn't know, can you kind of lay out where the triangle is?
On a map, you take a look at a map in eastern Ohio and you connect the dots from Conesville to Newcomerstown to Salt Fork State Park. And that geographical area is the Sasquatch Triangle. We came up with that term back in 1987 it was, in the spring of 87, when I held a 1 week quote unquote expedition. We weren't out there day and night because we had jobs, but it was a commitment to go out into the woods every day and evening and early night to see if we could find or hear anything or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that Sasquatch Triangle area is contained in parts of Coshocton, Guernsey, and Tuscarawas counties. In Coshocton County, you have two wildlife areas. One is known as the Woodbury Wildlife Area. That's in central and northwestern Coshocton County. And the other is known as the Columbus and Southern Coollands, which is in far southern Coshocton into northern Muskingum County. It hugs the Wills Creek area, Wills Creek Basin. And that's the Sasquatch Triangle. We found out, in 1987, that phrase had not been coined yet. And we were talking to the reporters because the local paper sent a reporter and a photographer with us every day of that expedition. And they said, well, that's like a triangular area, isn't it? And I said, well, let me look and see what you're talking about. And I said, yeah, that's like a triangular area. And so the first time that phrase was coined was in the local newspaper, and the headline read, "Stalking the Sasquatch Triangle." And from there, it just took off like wildfire, and that's where the Sasquatch Triangle is. There were numerous track discoveries and sightings that had taken place in that geographical area. And to my knowledge, it still could be active today, but there aren't that many people that are doing anything active out there as far as investigations are concerned.
So with all the investigation that you guys did in that area during that time, and considering that back in that time, your goal was the collection of information related to people's experiences, sightings, kind of data mining, if you will. What kind of behavioral patterns or seasonal rhythms did you find that kind of have stood the test of time, actually held up over decades?
As far as this, as far as this animal is concerned as being active, I think it's just one of those things where the warmer it gets, the more active it is, and the colder it gets, the less active it is. Do I think they take Interstate 77 down to South Carolina and then hop on whatever other interstate it is to go to Florida for the winter? No, I think they semi-hibernate. They might find an area of heavy growth for pine trees and stay under those areas. I discovered one thing. I know it's kind of surprising for some people to believe of me, but I discovered something several years ago when I was walking in the forest of Coshocton County, and it was freaking freezing cold outside. Wind chill had to be well below zero. It was a sunny day, but I was crazy enough to go out there anyway. Half a foot or more of snow on the ground. We're walking along, and I said, let's go under those pines up there and see if we can find anything, like bedded down areas. All right, so you know how a pine tree grows, you know how the branches are, how they're configured. We get under the pine tree, it's a sunny day. We notice it's like 30 degrees warmer under there. There's no wind chill. there's next to nothing in the way of snow on the ground. Allah, if you're a wild animal and you want to get out of the elements, wouldn't you find common sense to get into an area that's like this?
Sure.
Maybe they hide in amongst the pines or the heavy forest growth where the wind can't penetrate the inside of that growth, or the snow doesn't accumulate heavily underneath there.
Natural wind breaks.
Yeah, exactly. So that could be, but I think the most active times in this part of the state are anywhere between March and November. And then the rest, and you have to have a couple of different things for a sighting to take place. You have to have a Bigfoot creature. You have to have an eyewitness spot the Bigfoot creature. And then you have to have the eyewitness contact a researcher. And then that researcher has to be open enough to disseminate that information and amongst other researchers so that the general public and other researchers know that, hey, guess what? A sighting just took place.
Yeah.
So we have to have all that information come together so we can get an idea as to when they may or may not be active.
Is there one thing that you can pull from all of the stories that you've heard, all of the people that you've talked to who have had experiences? Is there one thing that still bothers you because it shouldn't exist if Sasquatch is not real?
Yeah, I would probably have to side with Krantz on that one, the lack of a body or the lack of bones. I know in Ohio we have what they call a deer mice. They are calcium feeders, and they'll scarf up a dead deer in no time at all.
Mm.
But the deer is not as big as a Bigfoot. And, there's coyotes in every county in Ohio, 88 counties. There's an increasing population of black bear. There's an increasing population of mountain lion. So I would say that the biggest thing that still, it doesn't make me lose sleep at night unless I'm seriously thinking about why it hasn't been discovered. But the one thing that really bothers me is the fact that there's no hard evidence that you can poke. There's no bones. There's no body. There's nothing like that. The oceans cover 70% of the earth, and a very minute fraction of the oceans have ever been explored, and an even smaller number of the aquatic life has ever been discovered. But we're talking about the oceans that go up to 35,000 feet deep. This is land. These are pine trees. People own a lot of property. However, there just may be a sighting or two, or I should say a story or two that is out there that hasn't really been widely circulated yet about, you've heard of Hangar 18.
Yes.
Maybe there's a Hangar 19. Maybe the government has a body of a Sasquatch, or more than one. And did you ever stop to think, to wonder? I mean, all the conferences that I've held, all of the regular Bigfoot meetings that I've held, and all of the people that subscribe to my newsletter over the years, I'm not saying this egotistically, but if I were crazy enough to sit here at my desk and tell you, no, I don't think anybody from the government ever attended one of my meetings or conferences, I think I'd be wrong.
I think you'd be correct in being wrong.
Yeah.
I think that would be a story for another day.
Yeah. But, I'm in the process of writing another booklet, of which I hope to have available at the conference.
Okay.
And in the booklet, I don't mention no lake locations. I don't mention any geographical names and nothing like that. But there's going to be a story or two that I think people will find very hard to believe. You know, we were talking earlier about these really bizarre stories of, you know, UFO connections possibly, or whatever, like the experimental forest and the right. A-frame and right. places like that and all that kind of stuff. If you heard the 12 one-hour audio cassette tapes from Rome, Ohio, when that series of events took place in the summer of 1981 that I heard, I have to sometimes, honest to God, stand in the bathroom or in the hallway, look in the mirror and say, if that stuff was true, why are you still interested in it? Because if that's the case, there is no answer to this mystery.
Yeah.
There was stuff happen up there, I kid you not, that was recorded on audio cassette tape as it happened, and interviews with the family of things that happened. And if they were telling the honest to God's truth and all that stuff that happened was 100% legitimate, I'll talk to you later. Because there's no way of explaining it. There's no answer. There's stuff that happened in Rome, Ohio that you cannot explain logically if it was true.
I'd love to hear.
I mean, there's just so much stuff. It's like opening a can of worms.
Yeah.
There's so much crazy stuff out there. Let me just think that Bigfoot's a physical flesh and blood creature and go to bed at night with no nightmares.
Well, we'll go back to I mentioned to you that, you know, I had done some paranormal investigations, and the thing that kind of always strikes me when we start talking about Bigfoot and the parallels or the possible connection between, again, I'm not saying that Bigfoot jumps in a portal so it can get on a UFO and then take off and go to its own planet. That's not what I'm saying. But having spent time in haunted locations, having spent time trying to investigate and trying to communicate with things that apparently are willing to interact with you from the ether, you know, so many people talk about the sound of a wood knock in the woods,
right,
related to Bigfoot. Has anybody ever seen a Bigfoot grab a big log and smack it against a tree? I don't believe.
Good question.
I don't believe.
I guarantee you, at least as far as I'm thinking right now, the grand total number is 0.
Right.
Because if you did, you're going to do something anatomically in your pants you're not going to admit to anybody to begin with. And then second of all, you're not going to talk to very many people about it, because who's going to believe you without the evidence?
Right. But
you know who started the whole idea about wood on wood in the forest?
What? Who?
Me.
Did you really?
Back in December 30th of 1989, me and 2 other guys were in Coshocton County, and we were getting ready to walk out of the forest. There was about 6 inches of snow on the ground. It was a warm evening. There was a lot of fog. And we had found a blood trail where we think somebody had shot a deer, or a deer had become wounded or whatever. It was in amongst deer tracks, and it went way back into the woods. And we followed it for a while, and then we realized it's getting kind of dark. We got to get out of here. We weren't trespassing. We just didn't have any lights or any protection. So we start walking out. We get to a point where about 200 yards away from the vehicles, and off to our left-hand side, there's a little valley, and then it goes up a hill, crest at the hill, and then on the backside of the hill, there's an open area where there's a couple of 3 old mining lakes. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we hear what sounds like somebody taking a baseball bat and banging it up against a tree. And here's the question. Who did it? We don't know. Was it intelligent? We got a pretty good idea it was very intelligent. Why do we think it was intelligent? Well, let me put it to you this way. There were 3 of us that were walking that trail, walking back to our car. We heard this wood on wood 2 or 3 separate times. Each of those separate times, would you care to guess how many times it hit up against that tree?
I can tell you exactly. I know what it is. It's 3.
Exactly.
And I'm going to tell you why I know that.
You did it?
Well, this is not something I expected to go into with you, but we're here and let's do it. So, to finish my thought was with hearing the wood knock. Many times in the course of a paranormal investigation in, say, like a haunted location, a haunted house, we will hear an audible knock. Sometimes we'll hear a knock on a piece of wood, a desk, on the wall. Odd. Then we'll have light anomalies. Now there's a difference between taking a photograph with a flash in a haunted house, and it's dusty and it's old and there's stuff floating around in the air, and then your flash illuminates that dust, and then people think they have an orb. There's a difference between that and an orb like I described I saw with my daughter, which came out of nowhere for no good reason, was there and then was gone. So these things seem to be components of paranormal investigations. They very much translate into experiences that people have out in the woods when apparently around the phenomenon of Bigfoot as well. So it makes me start thinking, is that sound of wood on wood in the woods, is that actually what you're hearing? Or are you hearing a component of them coming into our ability to perceive them? They're either, it can be a trap. It can be, if for your mind, if you start going down that rabbit hole, it can lead to a lot of things. And I don't profess to know anything. I've done these things. I've had experiences in a bunch of different areas, and I don't know what the hell they are. But there are things that seem to be similar and seem to translate very well to other types of experiences with even extraterrestrial stuff. So, I kind of lost my train of thought of where I was going with this, but, it makes me wonder, what is that noise? Now, the reason I can go back and I can relate to your experience with hearing 3 knocks, Manistee National Forest, the summer that COVID was, reared its ugly head. What's the first holiday in the summer? Labor Day? No, Memorial Day.
Memorial Day. Yeah, Memorial.
I went on there were 3 of us. We went on a 3-man, 3-day kayak trip through the middle of the Manistee National Forest. And the first night that we were there, good buddy of mine, and then a guy that I did not know. That other guy was somebody that my buddy knew and trusted. So, we had paddled our kayaks for the better part of the day. We found a nice place to pull off the river, and we sat there. We heated up our dinners in a bag, and we sat in front of a fire. It was dark. It was late. It was probably in the neighborhood of 11:30. We were all 3 of us were sitting around the fire. During this time that we were sitting around the fire, we had 3 owls, which I actually recorded on my cell phone. I still have the audio of it. It sounded odd. It sounded like somebody trying to sound like an owl. It was kind of more of a, and it repeated in a series of 3. The loudest one came across the river from us. Then that was followed by one that seemed a bit more distant behind us, sounded like it was on the same side of the river as us. And then another one would happen up ahead of us, and it continued to go in that same pattern. It was always the one across from us, then the one behind us, then the one ahead of us. And it did that multiple times, to the point where I actually pulled out my phone and I recorded it. The guy that I did not know well had a penchant for drinking beer, and he had brought plenty of beer for him to drink. He drank a bunch of beer while we were sitting around the fire. He got up, went and got another one, took a leak, came back, sat down, and apparently it hit him that he had exceeded his limit, and it was time for him to go to bed. So he got up and he excused himself, and he went and he got into his hammock to pass out. So at that point, there was two of us. From the point that there were two of us in the silhouette of the fire, we never heard another triple owl. Once there were two of us, we heard two wood knocks. My buddy, who is pretty much on the fence about this kind of stuff, he looked over at me and he's like, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "I did." And he said, "Was that a..." And I kind of smiled at him. And he's like, "Was that a effing wood knock?" And I said, "Nope, that was two of them." And he's like, "Yeah, you're right." And, maybe a minute later, maybe it might have been a couple of minutes later, you hear two more wood knocks. Whack, whack. And then a couple of minutes later, you heard a couple more.
Yeah.
But it was only two.
As compared to three earlier.
As compared to three owls repeating, so it wasn't until we ended that trip and the rest of that night, once I got into my hammock, and it was a night from hell. I had ordered all my stuff off of Amazon. The hammock was supposed to, I didn't cover, but put socks on my hands. And as I'm sleeping, you can hear the river flowing. And I know that get insects that have, just like people who fly fish, sizable, sounded like it in splashing and splash. Mine playing with me was actually able to, I literally had manufactured their asses off because it was just going to be, the name is of the food that I had turned into my stomach. And I realized I didn't want to leave the area. I had heard there were off and go dig a hole. It was, or cause night. And from the fire, I was like from threes and series of twos. Is that their way of, there's three. I could be, but it just.
Absolutely. Sticks out in my mind about whatever I me or doesn't know me. And the one part forefront of it is that the Sasquatch wild and that's one I remember today. That's not say that.
That's one thing, the native oral tradition on orally them as a in the same
right. Yep. It's in this area where the Delaware 1800s be called Gecko Lamuckachop about the native woods to keep peace with the bison or bear back for the food.
It's a good point.
Years ago is what they were saying.
So we're at it's been to me wind this up with letting in Newcomerstown.
5th Annual Bigfoot Conference from Salt Fork
Good friend
State
of mine.
Park will be there. Sorry, John. Honored that I in an area. A great friend, read his bio that I put on Facebook recently. The man is just you wouldn't believe what he's done in his lifetime, and I'm sure there's much more to come. So John Horrigan from the Boston area will be here. Then we have Seth Breedlove from Northeast Ohio, from the Canton, Ohio area, the creator of Small Town Monsters. Yeah. He's going to be here giving a presentation. And then we've got one other person, and that's Adam Davies, the explorer who has been on numerous television shows in England and elsewhere to talk about some of his most interesting experiences as well. Free of charge, no admission cost whatsoever unless you want to give a donation, which we will happily take to help cover the cost of the room, accommodations, travel expenses, etc. Because it, no matter what you think, these events are not free to put on. They do cost somebody money. And that's what, like with folks like that get vendors tables or people that give donations or whatever, that all goes towards different things that we're gonna cover the conference with. So it's the doors will open at 10 a.m. The event will begin at 11 a.m. and it'll run until approximately 6. We're going to have a number of vendors' trucks outside, food trucks. So don't worry, there'll be plenty there to grab, to munch on, and to drink iced tea, lemonade, whatever the case may be. So I'm hoping it's going to be a fantastic event. I'm hoping everyone goes home with a smile on their face and memories to survive the rest of their lifetimes, because it's going to be very interesting what goes on at the event. And I will tell you that, and no one knows what this item is, but there will be a special door prize for one person that will be at the conference. And I won't tell what it is. I won't tell how they're going to win it, nothing like that. I'll just say that you will receive a special door prize at the conference that will be yours to take home and hopefully cherish for days on end. And no, it's not a photo of me.
In tandem to that announcement, I would like to announce to our listeners of Uncomfortable that I will be at this conference as well as a vendor. And the intention is that I will be available to record live interviews for the entire day. So if you are interested in coming out and supporting this fine conference, excuse me, please make sure you find your way over to the Uncomfortable podcast table. And if you have an experience or you have a story that you would like to relate, I'll be there to record your encounter or your story for the entire day. So,
yep, we're looking forward to it. Looking forward to having all the vendors there. All these folks that are coming in as vendors, they have a wide range of items that are available for purchase. Make sure you visit whatever you do, please make sure you visit every vendor's table and bring plenty of resources with you to buy all kinds of souvenirs, because like I said, this will be number 25 and I don't really have any intention of having another one. The last one I had was 10 years ago and we're having this one. And I think the biggest reason that I decided to hold it was every conference that I hear of that comes forward out there has a price tag to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do something for the general public where they can attend and not have to worry about paying to get into the door.
Right.
So come on out and enjoy yourself. And if you wear an alien outfit, there is a mental hospital just 20 miles down the road, and I have connections. Not because I was there before, but because I know people. So keep that in mind.
Back to the idea on the vendors, as far as everybody showing up, and by not charging for the event and that you do free up the ability for people who are coming and attending to spend that money with the vendors.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I personally will be bringing a new Uncomfortable podcast t-shirt that has never seen the light of day. It's got a completely new design, so make sure you keep your eye out for that.
Great. Sounds good. Sounds very good.
Don Keating, thank you so much for joining me today. Your work has, in no small way, shaped the way Bigfoot research there in Ohio has gone. It's been an honor to get to dig into the history and get a little bit of the insights behind that whole thing with you.
I'm in my early 60s. I don't openly admit that too much, although I don't feel like I'm nearly that old because, believe it or not, physically speaking, I bowl 4 nights a week.
Do you?
And I'm left-handed, so that helps a little bit.
Hey, nice. I'm left-handed as well.
All right, cool. We're left on. Anybody that doesn't understand left-handed will not understand that comment. But, you know, what's going to happen with all this material once I'm gone? You know, that's all that material I told you that's in my basement. I haven't decided what's going to happen with that yet. So as a closing comment, thanking you very much, Eric, for having me on your podcast. I greatly appreciate it. I hope we have a lot of people there. I think the seating capacity is around 350, give or take. So get there early, bring plenty of cash to buy all kinds of souvenirs. But what's going to happen with all that stuff? I don't know yet. The answer to the mystery could be in my basement. Mm-hmm. Think about that one.
And while you're thinking about that, think about this. Newcomerstown, Ohio, September 27th, the Annual Bigfoot Conference. Don Keating, you don't want to miss it. They got John Hickenbottom from Salt Fork. You've got Seth Breedloves from Small Town Monsters. Researcher John Horgan, and adventurer Adam Davies. It's going to be a great day. It's a great day for Bigfoot. Don, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. And I'm going to turn around and get this out probably by the first part of next week. So maybe by Tuesday of this week. So we can get it in the ears of people and let them know what's happening and try to get people out there for it.
All right. Sounds like a winner. Appreciate it.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Hey, I'm looking forward to meeting you. We got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yes, we do. As well, I'm excited to get a chance to talk with you, sir.
Sounds good.
Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.